I was shoved into the back row of my own graduation photo so my sister could shine in my cap and gown even though she dropped out. Dad laughed, "You're just book smart." I let them finish their toast. Then I pulled out the envelope the dean gave me. Their smiles faded when I read it aloud. Just as they stood to leave, the front door swung open and... I'm Ray Whitaker. I'm 26 now, but this story starts back when I was 22, the day of my college graduation. Though, to be honest, the real beginning was long before that. I grew up in Fairview, Ohio. It's the kind of place people pass through on the way to somewhere more important. One high school, a post office, a handful of dive bars, and a fading mural downtown from the 80s that no one's bothered to repaint. My family lived in a modest two-story house on Poplar Street. Faded white siding, a chain-link fence, and a tired garden mom gave up on halfway through my childhood. I was the second daughter. My older sister, Sherry, was 3 years ahead of me, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, she was it. My favorite. The center of every conversation, the reason for every proud smile from our parents. Even when she was suspended twice in high school for skipping class, they said it was because she was too bright to be bored by books. When she lit up a cigarette at 16 in front of the church, Mom said it was a phase. When she totaled the family's Corolla, Dad handed her the keys to his truck without blinking. Me? I was the opposite. Quiet. Bookish. I did well in school, got perfect attendance awards, brought home A like they were groceries. No one threw a party for those A's. They barely looked up from the TV. It wasn't always malicious. At least, I don't think so. It was just a pattern. A slow erosion of being seen. It became background noise in my own house. Sherry dropped out halfway through her senior year. She said high school was a scam, and she wanted to find herself. My parents barely blinked. Dad actually gave her a few $100 to get started. She moved in with a friend across town and bounced between random jobs. Bartending. Dog grooming. 1 month she tried painting, the next she was starting a YouTube channel. Meanwhile, I quietly finished high school, applied to college, and got a full scholarship to Ohio State. I cried when the letter came. Not out of joy, really, but because I thought, finally. Maybe now they'll see me. They didn't. When I told them about the scholarship, Mom said, "That's great, honey," while folding laundry. Dad didn't say anything at all. I moved to Columbus and threw myself into school. I didn't party. I worked 2 part-time jobs to help with expenses not covered by the scholarship. I joined clubs, made friends, stayed up too late in the library and sometimes cried in bathroom stalls during finals. But I got through it. For years later, I was walking across the stage, graduating summa cum laude from the Fisher College of Business. A few days before the ceremony, I asked my parents if they were coming. "Oh, do we have to sit through the whole thing?" Mom asked. Dad muttered, "We'll come to the dinner party." So I rented a backyard tent for a small celebration at their house after the graduation. Just close family. I bought all the food, cleaned the yard, even paid a local girl to help set up tables and chairs. I didn't want to make it a big deal, I just wanted to mark the moment. I was the first in my family to get a college degree. I hoped, maybe stupidly, they'd acknowledge that. That morning, I put on my cap and gown and drove to the ceremony alone. My roommate Lyra came, bless her heart, and took pictures from the stands. When it was over, she gave me a framed photo of me holding my diploma with the stadium in the background. I cried when she handed it to me. My family didn't ask to see any photos. At the backyard party later that day, I brought my cap and gown again in case anyone wanted to take pictures with me. I'd made a little table with cupcakes and graduation-themed napkins. I even laid out a few of my honors cords because, again, I wanted to share this. We were maybe 30 minutes into things when it happened. Dad picked up the cap and laughed, "Hey, let's do a fun one, Sherry, try this on." Before I could respond, Mom was already placing it on Sherry's head like it was a tiara. Sherry beamed. I was standing right there. In my gown. Then Mom said, "Let's get a photo, Ray, kneel in front, make sure Sherry's front and center." I was too stunned to speak. The woman who hadn't graduated, who hadn't even set foot on a college campus, was now wearing my symbol of achievement. And they were posing me like an afterthought in my own photo. So I knelt. I smiled. I swallowed the lump in my throat because that's what I'd always done. Then Dad raised his beer and said, "To our star." Sherry raised hers back. "Cheers to me." "And Ray, too," Mom added. "Of course." I stood up. I walked to the cooler, pulled out a small manila envelope from my bag, the one the dean had given me at the private reception for honors graduates. I hadn't opened it yet. I wanted to do it with my family. "I want to read something," I said. They turned. Dad was smirking. Sherry was fixing her lip gloss in a compact mirror. I opened the envelope. "Dear Ms. Whitaker," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance into the Columbia Business School Early MBA program. You have been awarded the President's Fellowship and a full academic scholarship beginning fall 2023. Silence. Mom blinked. "Columbia?" she echoed. "In New York?" Sherry added, as if that was the part to focus on. Dad took a sip of his beer and chuckled. "Well, look at that. Guess you really are book smart." The words hit like a slap. "I worked my ass off," I said, louder now. "For 4 years. While you were chasing whatever half-baked dream you had, Sherry. While you," I turned to Dad, "didn't even ask what I majored in." No one said a word. "I did this on my own," I said. "And I thought maybe, just maybe, today could be about me. For once." Just then, as if on cue, the front door creaked open. Everyone turned. It was Marla. My godmother. My mom's cousin. She hadn't been around in years, after a family falling out no one would ever explain to me. But there she was, standing in the doorway like a ghost from the past, holding a beat-up leather binder. "I figured it was time," she said. Her eyes didn't leave my parents. "What are you doing here?" Mom said, eyes narrowing. "I came for Ray," Marla replied calmly. "Because I knew you wouldn't do right by her. And it's time she knew the truth." And that's when everything I thought I knew about my family started to unravel. Marla stepped fully into the backyard, heels crunching lightly on the gravel path my dad had half-laid 3 summers ago. She looked older than I remembered, her hair mostly silver now, pulled back into a low knot, but her presence was just as sharp, just as unapologetic. She walked right up to me, not even acknowledging my parents, and handed me the binder. It was heavier than I expected. Worn edges. Faint handwriting on the cover that had long faded into smudged lines. My hands trembled as I opened it. "You deserve to know," she said gently, though her eyes were locked on my father, like she was daring him to stop her. The first page was a birth certificate. My name. My birth date. My mother's name. My father's. Then she flipped to the next page. Another birth certificate. Different hospitals. Different states. Different baby. "What is this?" I asked. "That," Marla said, pointing at the second one, "is your parents' biological daughter. Stillborn. June 1997. My mouth went dry. The air thickened. Behind me, I heard Mom gasp. Then, nothing. Marla kept turning pages. Hospital bills. Letters. Some handwritten notes. A photograph of an infant I didn't recognize. A form from a women's shelter in Pennsylvania. A confidential adoption arrangement, not processed through an agency, but through a private agreement. It didn't name me, but the dates lined up. The timeline. The city. My birth month. I looked up at her. "I don't understand," I said, barely above a whisper. "You were adopted," she said. "Illegally. Not officially, anyway. Your birth mother was young. Scared. She was staying at the shelter where I volunteered back then. When I heard your parents lost their baby and disappeared for a few months, I had my suspicions. But no one would talk. Your mom never wanted you. Your dad, he just wanted to pretend they hadn't lost a child." I stared at the photos. My throat burned. I suddenly remembered that year, flashes from childhood I'd never thought twice about. My mom is leaving for weeks. Coming back thinner. Sadder. I was told she went to visit her sister in Illinois. There had never been any photos of her there. My knees felt weak, and I sat down on one of the lawn chairs, the plastic groaning under me. "Is this true?" I asked, not looking at either of them. Mom burst into tears. Dad stayed quiet. "Say something," I demanded. Mom finally sobbed, I didn't want to do it. Your father, he said we couldn't go through the pain of trying again. He knew someone. It happened so fast. They said you'd already been born. That no one wanted you. We thought, it would just be easier. Easier? I echoed, my voice cracking. We were grieving, she yelled, her voice suddenly sharp. You were supposed to make it better. Dad finally spoke. His voice was flat. Cold. We gave you a roof. Food. You got your education, didn't you? You treated me like a stranger, I spat. Like a burden. You weren't ours, he said simply. Not really. The words dropped like stones. Sherry stood off to the side now, arms crossed, face pale. She looked at Marla, then at me. You knew, she asked her. Marla shrugged. I had suspicions. But I didn't get confirmation until last year when someone from the shelter contacted me about old records. I waited for the right time. And this is it? Mom snapped. At a party? No, I said, standing again. At my graduation. No one said a word. The neighbors' wind chimes tinkled faintly in the breeze. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed to life. The world outside continued like none of this had just shattered the center of mine. I looked at Sherry. She was chewing her lip, awkward and uncomfortable, like she'd finally realized this wasn't about her. You always hated me, I said to my parents. And now I know why. No, Mom whispered, shaking her head. We didn't hate you. You never wanted me. They didn't deny it. Marla stepped closer, put a hand on my shoulder. Come with me, she said quietly. Just for tonight. I nodded, numb. I didn't pack. I didn't grab the photo of me in the cap and gown. I just walked out of that yard with Marla and got in her car. Behind me, I could still hear Sherry asking Mom what the hell just happened. Mom sobbing. Dad yelled something about people always digging up the past. I didn't turn around. We drove in silence for a while before Marla finally spoke again. I tried to stay in touch after you were born. I used to send cards. Letters. They sent them all back. When you were little, I'd show up sometimes. Pretend to visit the family. But I just wanted to see how you were doing. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. I didn't have proof until last year. And I didn't want to destroy you unless I had to. Too late for that, I muttered. We stopped at a gas station off I-71. I went into the restroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Same brown eyes. Same crooked front tooth I never got fixed. Same girl, but now I felt like a stranger to myself. Who was I? I didn't belong to them. I didn't belong anywhere. And yet, I'd made it. Everything I'd accomplished, I had done that. Without their help. Without love. Without support. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it meant everything. Marla's house in Akron was small but cozy. She made tea and offered me her guest room. I curled up on the twin bed under a faded quilt and stared at the ceiling until morning. I didn't cry. I didn't even sleep. I just lay there, my mind spinning with memories, so many small things that suddenly made sense. The way my mom never hugged me unless someone else was watching. The way Dad never told me, I'm proud of you. The way Sherry sneered every time I tried to share good news. I was never part of that family. Not really. But that meant I wasn't obligated to stay tied to them either. And I was just starting to realize how much power that gave me. The next morning was gray and humid. Akron had that damp summer heaviness, the kind where the air sticks to your skin before noon. I stood in Marla's kitchen, barefoot, drinking coffee out of a chipped World's Best Aunt mug while she flipped eggs in a cast-iron skillet. Neither of us said much at first. The quiet was comfortable. Like I'd stepped into a different kind of family, one that didn't demand I earn my place with silence or obedience. After breakfast, Marla slid the binder across the table again. There's more, she said, almost apologetically. I hesitated before opening it. A part of me wanted to shove it in a drawer and never look again. But I knew I wouldn't be able to leave it alone. The next few pages included letters, handwritten and faded, from a girl named Teresa M. They were dated late '96 to early '97. The penmanship was uneven, rushed. Some had tear stains on them. She was your birth mother, Marla said, sitting across from me. 17. Kicked out when she got pregnant. She stayed at the shelter for about 4 months before giving birth. She never came back after that. I read every line of those letters like I was starving. She talked about her fears, her loneliness, how she knew she couldn't raise a baby, but how she hoped, begged, whoever took her child would love her better than her own family ever did. I hope you grow up knowing you matter, she'd written in one. Even if I'm not there, I hope you shine. The irony of that last sentence made me physically ill. I tried to track her down, Marla continued. She left no forwarding address. I even hired someone after I found those letters. No luck. Is she alive? I asked. Marla shrugged. I don't know. I wanted to be angry with Teresa. For giving me away. For not fighting harder. But the longer I sat there, the more I realized she'd tried. At least in her own way. And honestly, maybe she'd done the right thing. At least I was here. I was alive. Educated. Standing on the edge of something big. The people who raised me? They didn't ruin me. They just gave me more to fight against. Later that day, I got a message from Sherry. Sherry, text, 1:41 p.m., can we talk? Alone? I stared at the screen for a long time. Marla was outside watering her succulents when I stepped onto the porch. She wants to talk, I said, holding up my phone. She looked up, shrugged. Your call. I agreed to meet Sherry at a coffee shop halfway between Akron and Fairview, neutral territory. It felt like a business meeting. I wore a button-down and jeans, like I was dressing for armor. Sherry was already there when I arrived. Sunglasses on, iced latte in hand, leg bouncing like she'd been sitting there for an hour. She didn't hug me. I didn't offer. Thanks for coming, she said. Her voice was lighter than I expected. Almost chipper. I didn't come for you, I replied. I came because I need closure. She nodded, fiddled with her straw. I didn't know, she said. About you not being their real kid. Neither did I. I mean, I always thought it was weird. How they treated you. But I figured you were just different. Different? You know. Quiet. Kinda intense. I gave her a look. That's what happens when you grow up knowing you're the second choice but not knowing why. She flushed a little. Look, I'm not here to defend them. I think what they did was messed up. But I'm also not here to apologize for being my favorite. That's on them, not me. I laughed, bitter and dry. You're unbelievable. No, I'm just real, she said. And I know we're not close, Ray. But I don't hate you. I never have. I just didn't think we had anything in common. You mean like parents? She paused, biting her lip. I guess. We sat in silence for a moment. You know what the worst part is? I finally said. Even after learning I was never really theirs, it still hurts that they didn't love me. Sherry didn't respond. She just stirred her drink. They could have tried, I continued. They could have given me something. But I got their leftovers. Their silence. Their resentment. She looked down at her lap. I used to wish I was you. That stunned me. Excuse me? She gave a weak smile. You had direction. You had discipline. You knew what you wanted. I never had that. I just coasted. Let them love me because it was easy. I didn't know what to say to that. We didn't hug when we left. No dramatic reunion. Just a nod and a quiet goodbye. When I got back to Marla's, she was on the couch, knitting a lopsided blanket. Well, she asked. It was weird, I said, sitting beside her. But, maybe helpful. She nodded without looking up. Closure doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it just feels final. I stayed with her for 2 more weeks. During that time, I started paperwork to legally change my last name. I didn't want to carry Whitaker anymore. That name had been a weight around my neck my whole life. I chose Albridge, Marla's maiden name. When the clerk asked why I wanted the change, I said, it's the name of the woman who showed up for me when it counted. The name felt strange at first. But it also felt like mine. Not something inherited. Something chosen. During those weeks, Columbia reached out again. They needed my final documents. I sent everything over with trembling fingers. Part of me still didn't believe I belonged. Even after everything I'd achieved, there was that tiny voice whispering, fraud, imposter, mistake. But the email that came a day later made it official. Welcome to Columbia Business School. We look forward to seeing you this fall. Marla cried when I told her. The kind of crying I always imagined a mom would do, unfiltered, proud, full of joy. I sat in her kitchen, watching her wipe her cheeks with a dish towel, and for the first time in a long time, I felt held. Not because someone said I had to be loved, but because someone chose to love me. And I still had so much to figure out. Where I came from. Who Teresa M. really was. Whether I'd ever want to speak to my parents again. Whether I'd tell people at Columbia this story or bury it in the deepest part of me. But for the first time, the future wasn't a dark hallway. I had to walk alone. It was wide open. And I was walking toward it, not looking back. Summer rolled on. Ohio's thick, heavy air gave way to warm August evenings. Crickets, long bike rides, the smell of hot pavement after a storm, all the usual sounds of ending chapters. I spent most of those last weeks in Akron preparing for the move to New York. Marla and I would sit in the evenings, planning logistics between sips of sweet tea and old jazz records humming in the background. But one thing gnawed at me, persistent as a splinter under my skin. I didn't just want to walk away. I wanted them to see what they lost. I wanted my parents to feel it, not as cruelty, but as clarity. The clarity of being on the outside, looking in. Just as I had been for 22 years. So I made a plan. It started with the invitation. A sleek, embossed envelope. Thick paper. Elegant calligraphy. The kind that makes you pause when it hits your mailbox. Inside, Columbia University MBA program, Presidential Fellowship reception. You are cordially invited to celebrate the incoming class of fellows, including Ray Albridge, recipient of the 2023 President's Honor Award. It was a formal event. Cocktail attire. Held at a rooftop venue in Manhattan with a view of the skyline, a string quartet, and catered by one of those names people in New York drop to sound important. I addressed the envelope to my parents. Another to Sherry. I knew they wouldn't ignore it. It was shiny. Public. Something they could brag about. They RSVP'd the same week. 2 weeks later, I flew to New York, moved into graduate housing, and started the whirlwind of orientation. New people, fast lives, and faculty members who looked you in the eye like you mattered. Then came the night of the reception. I wore a navy blue jumpsuit with gold earrings that caught the light when I turned my head. Simple. Strong. Not the girl who used to cry quietly in the basement when her parents forgot parent-teacher night. Marla flew out just for the event. She wore silver, beamed at everyone, and introduced herself as Ray's real family. My parents arrived late. They walked in together, looking mildly uncomfortable in their Sunday best. Dad wore an ill-fitting blazer. Mom had a shawl she kept adjusting like she wasn't sure she belonged. Sherry followed a step behind in a black cocktail dress, her eyes darting around, trying to spot someone famous. I didn't approach them right away. Let them stew in unfamiliar territory. Let them see the circles I now stood in. I watched from across the room as a Columbia faculty member, Dr. Emmerich, introduced himself to them. "Oh, you must be Ray's family," he said. "We're so honored to have her. Brilliant young woman. Quite possibly one of the strongest candidates we've had in years. You must be so proud." Mom's face twitched, unsure of what to say. Dad gave a stiff nod. Sherry stepped forward, fake confidence painted across her face. "She's always been the smart one," she said, smiling like it was a compliment. I stepped in then. "Glad you could make it," I said coolly. They all turned. Mom's eyes glistened, not with tears but with something like awe. Dad gave a slow, deliberate once-over, like he was seeing me for the first time. "You look different," Mom said. "I am different," I replied. "This is who I am when I'm not trying to earn your approval." We took our seats as speeches began. I was one of the final speakers of the evening. I walked up to the podium, heart pounding, but steady. I wasn't afraid anymore. "My name is Ray Albridge," I began. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago where I'd be today, I wouldn't have dared to guess it would be here. I glanced across the room. My parents locked eyes with me. Sherry shifted in her chair. I wasn't born into a family that nurtured ambition. I wasn't raised in a home where effort equaled encouragement. In fact, I was often reminded that being book smart wasn't enough. That I'd never really amount to much. A few polite gasps. A faculty member raised an eyebrow. But sometimes, not being seen pushes you harder. Sometimes, invisibility becomes a kind of freedom. You get to choose who you become. No one expects anything, so everything you build is entirely yours. I let the silence hang, just for a beat. And I built this. A long round of applause followed me back to my seat. My parents didn't approach me right away. They hung back as strangers congratulated me, as people asked to connect, as Marla hugged me like I'd just won the Nobel Prize. Eventually, Dad wandered up, hands in his pockets. Didn't expect you'd, talk about us up there. You think that was about you? I said with a smirk. No. That was about me. And how I got here in spite of you. He gave a small nod. Right. Mom didn't say anything. She looked hollowed out. Sherry didn't look at me at all. Before they left, I gave them a parting gift, a framed copy of the photo from my graduation at Ohio State, the real one, not the backyard one with Sherry in my gown. It was just me, holding my diploma, standing in front of the stadium. I handed it to my mom. This is the one that matters, I said. You missed it. Thought you might want a copy. She took it without a word. We haven't spoken since. They didn't come to my MBA graduation, and I didn't send another invitation. The name Albridge is on every record now, school documents, my apartment lease, even my professional email signature. Sherry messaged me a few months after the reception. Sherry, text, 10:27 a.m., thinking of applying to a local community college. You inspired me. I never replied. Some things don't need answers. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even planned at first. It was simply living better. Thriving. Becoming the woman they never believed I could be, and making sure the whole world knew it, while they sat quietly in the back row, watching. Right where they always put me.